Look, the history of Pashtuns in this region goes back forever. But right now, their future, well, it's being shaped by one single, incredibly powerful force: mistrust. In this explainer, we're going to dig into where that mistrust comes from and how it's brought millions of people to a critical crossroads. So let's just get right to the heart of the matter. It all comes down to a really tough question. At what point does mistrust stop protecting a community and start trapping it? That's the real puzzle we're going to unpack here. And this deep-seated mistrust, it didn't just pop up out of thin air, not at all. It's grounded in a long, painful history of state policies and actions that caused very real, lasting harm. Okay, so for decades, generations even, the areas that used to be the tribal areas, they basically lived under a whole different set of rules from the rest of the country. I mean, just try to picture this. You live in a place with no normal courts, where your citizenship feels kind of conditional, and where your entire village could be punished for something just a few people did. And on top of all that, your home became a battlefield for wars you never asked for. This image, it just captures the human cost. Let's take North Waziristan, for example. When the military operation started, huge populations were just forced to leave everything behind. Their homes, their businesses, their farms, the schools, all of it, just gone or destroyed. The message to these families was crystal clear. You are paying the price for a conflict you had no part in starting. This is where that mistrust is born. All right, but this is where the story gets really complicated. We've got to look at that moment, that pivot, where this completely justified mistrust starts to harden into something rigid, something that actually starts working against the community. And this comparison here, it really lays it all out. On the one hand, you've got mistrust as a protective tool. It's smart. It questions what the state does. It demands accountability. It looks out for the community. That's healthy skepticism. But when it hardens into a permanent identity, it's a different beast entirely. It rejects any state action, dismisses any attempt at reform as just another trick, and calls anyone who even tries to engage a traitor. It doesn't just question the system anymore. It slams the door shut on any possibility of ever changing it. So, if talking to the state is seen as a betrayal, what's the alternative? Well, for some, the answer was violence, as a form of resistance. But you've got to judge any action by its results, right? And that's where the story of SWAT is so incredibly important. When militants first took over in SWAT, their sales pitch was pretty good. Justice, religious purity, a better way. But the reality? Oh, it was an absolute nightmare. We're talking about public executions becoming normal. We're talking about the systematic destruction of schools, especially for girls. The entire local economy, which was built on tourism, just collapsed. Society itself started to crack, wiping out years and years of progress. So let's be super clear about this. Violence didn't empower SWAT. It did the exact opposite. It threw the entire region backwards by at least a decade. The trauma, the economic ruin, the military presence that followed, those were the real outcomes. And that brings us right up to a much more recent and really important test case: the historic merger of the old tribal areas, now called the merged districts, into the main province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. On paper, this was a massive deal, a huge chance for a reset. But this is where we see that tragic gap between the promise and the reality. The promises on paper, they were incredible. We're talking access to real courts, genuine political representation, a proper budget, the whole shebang. But what's actually happening on the ground? The courts are there, but they're mostly empty. The elections happen, but participation is weak. The tools for change are literally in place, but that hardened mistrust is stopping people from picking them up. And what you get is this heartbreaking stalemate. The rights are on the books, they legally exist, but this deep, deep belief that if you use the system, you're somehow forgiving all the bad things that happened in the past, well, it prevents people from taking full advantage of them. The tools for progress are just sitting there, collecting dust. So this really brings us to the toughest part. How do you break a destructive cycle like this? Well, it's gonna take some hard truths and a new way of thinking from everybody involved, both the state and Pashtun society. First, you have to understand what the trap even is. And it's this vicious, self-defeating loop. It goes like this. The community's deep mistrust leads to isolation. They pull back. That isolation is then used to justify more state and security control, which, you guessed it, just makes the original mistrust even deeper. It's a cycle where absolutely nobody wins. So you have to ask, right? Is this just the way it has to be? Is there another way out of this? And the answer is yes, absolutely. And the proof isn't even that far away. We just have to look at other parts of the very same province, these settled districts of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. In places where communities have decided to actively engage, you see real, tangible results. Local governments actually start working, making daily life better. People start using the court system, which means less reliance on force to solve problems. And when they get politically active, they build real bargaining power to demand change, not from the outside, but from within the system itself.
So here's the bottom line. The path forward really demands two big commitments, one from each side. For the state, it has to finally fully accept that its past policies caused real, lasting damage and that accountability isn't optional. But for Pashtun society, there's a hard truth too. Violence and separatism have failed, and mistrust without a strategy, well, it's just a prison. The key insight is that rights aren't just given. They're secured by forcing the system to actually deliver on its promises.
And that brings us to the ultimate takeaway. The goal can't just be to exist in a state of permanent opposition forever. As the source material puts it so perfectly, dignity does not come from permanent confrontation. It comes from results.
So that's the choice, isn't it? It's clear, but it's not easy. Is the future going to be more endless conflict, trapping everyone in the grievances of the past? Or is it going to be about smart, strategic change, using the tools that are available to actually build a better future? The history of an entire region is waiting for an answer.